First contact with food. The Interstellar Academy of Cultural Studies orbited the neutral planet Nexus VI, a massive ring-shaped structure that housed thousands of students from across the known galaxy. In the 300 years since humanity had joined the Galactic Coalition, they'd earned a peculiar reputation. Humans were the strange, squishy creatures from a high-gravity death world who possessed remarkable endurance, but seemingly bizarre cultural practices. Max Chen was about to unwittingly add to that reputation. The morning alarm in Max's quarters chimed with a gentle pulse, designed to wake students of various species without causing distress. Max groaned and rolled over, squinting at the chrono display that hovered above his bed. 6:30 Standard Galactic Time. Classes started at 800, which gave him just enough time for his morning ritual. Unlike his fellow human classmates who had adapted to the Academy's nutrient dispensers, Max refused to give up what he considered essential to his humanity: breakfast, a real breakfast, with actual coffee. He swung his legs off the bed and padded to the small kitchen unit he'd modified with parts smuggled from Earth on his last home visit. The smell of coffee beans filled the room as he ground them by hand, a practice his roommate Zilks, a crystalline thorian who absorbed nutrients through his translucent skin, found utterly baffling. "You are engaging in your morning ritual again," Zilks observed, his voice resonating like wind chimes. The thorian didn't sleep but entered a regenerative state for 2 hours each week. He watched Max with faceted eyes that reflected the room in kaleidoscopic patterns. "Can't function without it," Max replied, carefully measuring hot water and pouring it over the ground beans in a pour-over setup. "Trust me, you don't want to see me before coffee. I have observed you before and after this coffee. The behavioral difference is negligible." Max laughed. "That's because you've never seen me without it. There's a reason I never skip." As the coffee dripped through, Max prepared a simple breakfast of sourdough toast and scrambled eggs with spinach and cheese. He'd grown herbs in his window box, against Academy regulations, and sprinkled fresh basil over the eggs. The smell was heavenly to him, though Zilks had once described it as offensively particulate. "You are going to consume that now, before your intellectual activities?" Zilks asked. "Yep. Brain food," Max said, taking his first sip of coffee. The caffeine hit his system like a gentle wave, and he closed his eyes in momentary bliss. "Your species is remarkably inefficient," Zilks noted, not unkindly. "The Academy's nutritional dispensers provide optimal sustenance in 15 seconds. Max pointed his fork at Zilks. "That's the difference between humans and most species here. For us, food isn't just fuel. It's," he searched for the right words, "it's an experience, a pleasure, sometimes even art." Zilks's crystalline form shimmered in what Max had come to recognize as confusion. Pleasure from survival necessities seems contradictory to evolutionary efficiency. "Maybe that's why we survived our death world." Max grinned. "We found joy in the necessities." As he finished his breakfast, Max made a spontaneous decision. His interspecies cultural studies class had been discussing human adaptability all week, but the professor, a towering 12-limbed Arcanian named Dr. Vex, had focused entirely on physical adaptations, human endurance, temperature regulation, and wound healing. The cultural adaptations, which Max found far more interesting, had been largely ignored. "I'm taking my coffee to class," he announced. Zilks's crystal body flickered with surprise. "Consumption is prohibited in academic settings." "Actually, I checked the regs. They say no disruptive consumption activities during lectures. My coffee isn't disruptive." Max poured his remaining coffee into a sealed travel container he'd had specially made. "Besides, it's a cultural artifact. Educational, really." Zilks made a tinkling sound that Max recognized as skepticism, but said nothing further. Max arrived at the amphitheater-style classroom 10 minutes early, travel mug in hand. The room was already half full with students of various species settling into their adaptive seating arrangements. The floaters, gaseous beings from the methane clouds of Chipton, hovered near the ceiling. Several insectoid trill chittered in the back corner, while a group of aquatic Malorians bubbled contentedly in their hydration tanks along the wall. Dr. Vex was arranging his teaching materials at the front, actual physical objects instead of holograms, which Max found refreshingly old school. The professor's many eyes swiveled independently, keeping track of entering students. Max took his usual seat in the middle section, placing his travel mug on the small surface extension of his chair. The rich aroma of coffee immediately began to permeate the air around him. The first to notice was Krell, a canine-like varg with an enhanced sense of smell. Her snout twitched, and she turned sharply toward Max, ears perked in alarm. "Human Max," she growled softly, "you are exuding unfamiliar particles." "It's just coffee," Max explained, taking the sip. "A beverage from Earth. Helps us wake up and focus." Krell's ears flattened. "You ingest stimulants before learning sessions. Is this permitted?" Before Max could answer, more students began to notice. A trio of Malusians sent curious bubbles rising in their tanks. The nearest floater changed color from its usual calm blue to an interested orange and drifted closer to Max. Dr. Vex, who had initially been preoccupied with his materials, suddenly froze, all 12 of his limbs going rigid. His cluster of eyes swiveled in unison toward Max. "Mr. Chen," the professor's voice resonated with multiple harmonics, "you appear to be consuming something." Max held up his travel mug with a sheepish smile. "Sorry, Professor, it's coffee, an earth beverage, essential for morning cognitive function for many humans." Dr. Vex moved closer, his long, elegant limbs carrying him across the floor with surprising grace for his size. "You require chemical assistance for morning cognition?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Not exactly require," Max said. "It's more of a ritual, a comfort thing. Culturally significant. Most humans drink coffee or tea in the morning." A ripple of communication passed through the classroom. The concept seemed to fascinate the assembled aliens. Dr. Vex's eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep thought among Arcanians. "Is that food as well?" asked a melodious voice from the front row. It was Ilara, a bioluminescent Lumidian whose skin pulsed with gentle light. Max looked down at his travel container, momentarily confused. "No, this is just coffee, a drink." "Not that," Ilara clarified, her skin flashing in gentle patterns. "The remnants on your face covering." Max touched his mouth, embarrassed to discover a few crumbs from his toast still clinging to the corner of his lips. "Oh, no, that's just from breakfast. I had eggs and toast before class." This sparked an even greater commotion. Breakfast, before class. 2 separate consumption events in one morning cycle. Dr. Vex raised several limbs for silence, his eyes fixed on Max with newfound interest. "Mr. Chen, am I to understand that you engaged in a consumption ritual before arriving, and are now continuing a second consumption during class?" Max nodded, suddenly feeling like he was under a microscope. "Yes, sir. Like I said, it's cultural." Dr. Vex turned to address the class. "Students, it appears we have an unexpected opportunity for cultural observation. Our lesson plan today was to discuss human respiratory efficiency, but I believe Mr. Chen has inadvertently introduced a more compelling topic." He gestured toward Max with 3 limbs simultaneously. "Mr. Chen, would you be willing to educate us about human consumption rituals?" Max blinked in surprise. "Me? Teach the class?" Indeed. Often the most illuminating cultural insights come not from textbooks but from lived experience. Please, approach the teaching area. Feeling every alien eye, sensory organ, and perceptive apparatus in the room focused on him, Max made his way to the front of the classroom. He set his coffee mug on Dr. Vex's desk and turned to face his classmates, whose expressions ranged from curiosity to mild disgust to utter fascination. Human food," Max began awkwardly. "Where should I start?" Perhaps with a purpose, suggested Dr. Vex. Why do humans consume solid and liquid matter at such frequent intervals, and why is it ritualized rather than merely functional? Max took a deep breath. Well, physically, we need the nutrients and energy, of course. Humans typically eat 3 times a day: breakfast in the morning, lunch midday, and dinner in the evening. But it's more than just biological necessity. He warmed to his subject as he continued. Food for humans is social, emotional, and cultural. We don't just eat to live. The act of preparing food, sharing meals, and enjoying flavors is deeply meaningful to us. A trill student raised a segmented limb. Query: meaning derived from biological maintenance is inefficient. Clarification requested. Max smiled. That's the thing about humans. We find meaning in seemingly mundane things. Take breakfast. It's not just about morning nutrition. It's a moment of peace before the day begins, a ritual that helps us transition from sleep to activity. Some of us can't imagine starting the day any other way. He held up his coffee mug. This coffee, for instance, yes, it contains caffeine that helps me focus, but it's also comforting. The warmth, the aroma, the familiar taste, it's grounding. It makes me feel connected to Earth, to my family's morning rituals, even though I'm light years away. The classroom had gone completely still. Even the floaters had ceased their gentle bobbing to listen. You derive emotional satisfaction from putting dead plant and animal matter into your digestive tract? Asked Krell, her canine features contorted in what might have been disbelief. Absolutely, Max replied with conviction. Some of my most treasured memories involve food: holiday meals with family, celebratory dinners for special occasions, comfort food when I was sick or sad. Food is intertwined with nearly every significant human experience. Dr. Vex made a contemplative humming sound. Fascinating. Most sentient species evolved to minimize the time and energy spent on consumption, yet humans have elaborated upon it. This may explain certain resilience factors we've observed in your species. I have a hypothesis, offered Zilks, who until now had remained silent. Perhaps humans, evolving on a death world with inconsistent food supplies, developed psychological rewards for consumption to ensure they would prioritize it even when under stress. Fats. Actually pretty insightful, Max admitted, nodding to his roommate. But it's gone way beyond survival now. We have cooking competitions, festivals centered around food, entire professions dedicated to creating new and interesting flavors. Flavors, echoed Ilara, her skin pulsing with curiosity. You consume different varieties of matter for the sensory experience alone. Absolutely. Sweet, salty, bitter, sour, umami. These are our basic taste categories, but the combinations are endless. Different cultures on Earth have their own unique cuisines, cooking techniques, and flavor profiles. The Melosians bubbled excitedly in their tanks, sending ripples through their water. One of them activated their translation device. Human Max, do you mean to say that you select matter for consumption based on preference rather than optimal nutritional content? All the time, Max confirmed. Sometimes we eat things purely because they taste good, even if they have minimal nutritional value. This revelation sent another wave of astonishment through the classroom. The concept of choosing food for pleasure rather than function was clearly alien to most species present. Dr. Vex, who had been observing with growing interest, suddenly raised his upper limbs. I believe we have identified a significant cultural divergence worthy of further study. Mr. Chen, would you be willing to continue this discussion tomorrow, perhaps with practical demonstrations? Max grinned. You mean bring food to class? I'd be happy to. Excellent. Students, tomorrow's session will be a practical exploration of human consumption rituals. Participation will be optional for species with incompatible biochemistry. As the class returned to its scheduled topic, Max returned to his seat, sipping his now lukewarm coffee with a sense of pride. He'd never considered himself an ambassador for humanity before, but as he looked around at his classmates, many of whom were still watching him with fascination, He realized that sometimes the most profound cultural exchanges happen not through official channels, but through something as simple as breakfast. Just wait until they learn about dessert, he thought with a smile. The Great Taste Experiment. Word of Max's impromptu lecture spread quickly through the Interstellar Academy. By evening, his personal communication device was flooded with messages from curious students of various species, all wanting to know more about human consumption rituals. Several professors had also reached out, requesting interviews about Earth's culinary practices for their research. "You've stirred up quite the commotion," remarked Zilks as Max scrolled through his messages. The Thorian was holding a crystalline structure up to the light, absorbing minerals through his translucent skin, his version of dinner. "I had no idea alien species would find eating so fascinating," Max replied. "Don't any other species enjoy their food?" "Most sentient life forms evolved to make consumption as efficient as possible," Zilks explained. "The concept of deriving pleasure from a biological necessity is considered primitive by many species, yet paradoxically, your explanation has intrigued them." Max was about to respond when his device chimed with a priority message. It was from Dean Orella herself, the six-armed Sophosian who administered the academy. The message was brief. "Mr. Chen, your cultural insights have generated significant academic interest. The Academy Council proposes a human culinary exhibition for educational purposes. Other human students will be invited to participate. Please report to my office tomorrow at 1400 hours to discuss logistics." Max stared at the message in disbelief. "They want to turn my coffee into an entire exhibition." Zilks's crystalline body shimmered with what Max had come to recognize as amusement. "Your inefficient biological processes may prove diplomatically valuable after all." Dean Orella's office reflected her species' love of symmetry and mathematical precision. 6 identical workstations were arranged in a perfect hexagon, allowing her to work on multiple projects simultaneously with her 6 arms. She gestured for Max to sit in the visitor's chair with one hand while continuing to manipulate holographic displays with her other 5. "Mr. Chen," she said without looking up, "your demonstration in Dr. Vex's class has highlighted a significant oversight in our cultural curriculum. Despite 3 centuries of human integration into the Galactic Coalition, we have failed to properly document and understand your species' relationship with consumption." "It's just food, Mom," Max said, feeling slightly overwhelmed. All 6 of Dean Orella's arms paused, and she fixed her large, compound eyes on him. "Mr. Chen, in a galaxy where most advanced civilizations have evolved beyond the need for complex consumption rituals, your species' continued dedication to this practice represents a fascinating divergence in evolutionary problem-solving. It is anything but just food." Max shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not sure I understand." "Let me be direct," Dean Orella continued. "The Galactic Coalition values diversity of thought and approach. Humans have consistently surprised us with unconventional solutions to complex problems. It appears that your relationship with food may be connected to your species' remarkable adaptability and emotional intelligence. So, you want to study our eating habits?" "Precisely. We propose a 3-day exhibition where human students will demonstrate various Earth consumption rituals. We have already contacted the 27 other human students at the Academy, and most have expressed enthusiasm." Max wasn't surprised. Most humans at the Academy secretly missed real food, even those who pretended to have adapted perfectly to the nutrient dispensers. "What exactly would this exhibition involve?" he asked. Dean Orella activated a holographic display showing a 3D layout of the Academy's largest communal space. "We will convert Central Hall into demonstration areas representing different Earth regions. Human students will prepare and explain traditional meals while alien students observe, and where biologically compatible, participate." The idea was simultaneously exciting and daunting. Max had only meant to bring coffee to class, not spark an interplanetary food festival. But as he thought about it, a smile spread across his face. This could be fun. And he did miss the communal aspects of sharing meals. "I'm in," he said, But we'll need real ingredients, cooking equipment, and space to prepare everything properly. Dean Orella nodded, all 6 arms moving in synchronized satisfaction. The Academy will provide all necessary resources. This is now an official cultural exchange program with full funding. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of activity. 23 human students from various Earth regions eagerly joined the project, each proposing dishes from their cultural backgrounds. The Academy's fabrication units worked overtime to produce cooking implements that hadn't been needed on campus before: woks, tandoor ovens, pasta makers, grills, and countless specialized utensils. The Academy's hydroponics bay was reprogrammed to grow herbs and vegetables from Earth, and synthesizers were calibrated to recreate animal proteins that matched the taste and texture of Earth meat. It wasn't perfect, but it was remarkably close. Max found himself appointed as the unofficial coordinator, helping to organize the humans into workable teams and explaining the overall concept to bewildered alien faculty members. His tiny dorm room became command central, with students stopping by at all hours to discuss recipes or debate the best way to explain the concept of comfort food to beings who had evolved beyond the need for comfort. How do I explain spicy food to someone who doesn't have pain receptors? Asked Sunita, a culinary student from New Delhi, who was planning to demonstrate various curry dishes. Focus on the cultural significance rather than the sensation, suggested Max. Talk about how humans deliberately seek out controlled discomfort for pleasure. It's not just food, it's also thrill rides, horror films, and extreme sports. Aliens are going to think we're completely irrational, laughed Paolo, who was planning an Italian pasta station. Maybe we are, Max replied. But that's what makes us human. The morning of the exhibition arrived with a palpable buzz of excitement throughout the Academy. Central Hall had been transformed overnight. Where there had once been a stark, efficient communal space, there now stood what looked remarkably like an Earth food festival. Cooking stations representing culinary traditions from 6 continents were arranged in a large circle, each decorated with cultural symbols and staffed by enthusiastic human students. Max had chosen to focus on breakfast foods, coming full circle from the coffee that had started it all. His station featured a griddle for pancakes, a waffle iron, and an assortment of toppings ranging from maple syrup to fresh berries. Beside him, Kenji was preparing traditional Japanese breakfast items, while across the hall, Alina was setting up a Mediterranean spread of breads, olives, and cheeses. As the doors opened, alien students poured in with varying degrees of curiosity and apprehension. Some species couldn't physically consume Earth food, but they came to observe nonetheless. Others were equipped with specialized adapters that would allow them to taste without digesting. Dr. Vex arrived early, all 12 of his limbs quivering with academic excitement. "Mr. Chen, this is unprecedented," he said, eyes swiveling to take in the entire hall. In 3 centuries of human-alien relations, no one has thought to create such a comprehensive cultural exhibition centered around consumption. "That's because you've all been too focused on our physical adaptations," Max replied, flipping a perfectly golden pancake. "But if you want to understand humans, you need to understand how we relate to food." The first hesitant aliens approached Max's station, drawn by the sweet aroma of pancakes and the visual spectacle of golden batter bubbling on the griddle. "This is breakfast?" asked Ilara, the bioluminescent Lumidian from his class. Her skin pulsed with curious patterns of light. "One type of breakfast," Max explained. "Different humans prefer different morning meals, but pancakes are a popular choice in many parts of Earth." He slid a small pancake onto a plate and drizzled it with maple syrup. "Would you like to try? It's been confirmed as compatible with your biochemistry." Ilara's skin flashed with nervous excitement. "I consume nutrients through photosynthesis and mineral absorption. I have never ingested solid matter." "First time for everything," Max encouraged. He cut a small piece with a fork and held it out to her. With visible trepidation, Ilara accepted the fork and carefully brought the pancake to her mouth. The room seemed to go silent as everyone watched. She placed it in her mouth, and her eyes widened immediately. Her entire body lit up with brilliant pulses of blue and gold light. "Sweet Creator," she exclaimed, her voice musical with surprise. "It contains sensations, many at once, texture and temperature and taste." Her reaction drew a crowd. Soon, a line formed at Max's station, each alien eager to experience the pancake phenomenon. Max found himself explaining not just the food itself, but the context around it: lazy weekend breakfasts with family, the comfort of warm food on cold mornings, the childhood joy of seeing faces made of fruit on pancakes. Similar scenes played out across the hall. At Paolo's pasta station, a group of insectoid trill were experiencing the concept of al dente with chittering excitement. Sunita's curry demonstration had drawn a crowd of heat-resistant species who were fascinated by the deliberate inclusion of irritants as flavor enhancers. Kenji was patiently explaining to a confused floater why the precise arrangement of Japanese breakfast items was as important as their nutritional content. But the most surprising reaction came from Kral, the Varga student who had initially seemed disgusted by human consumption habits. She approached Max's station after the initial rush had subsided. "Human Max," she growled, her canine features hard to read. "I wish to understand the social bonding aspect you mentioned in class." Max smiled. "That's actually perfect timing. I was about to demonstrate communal breakfast." He gestured to a longer table he had set up adjacent to his cooking station. "Would you like to join us? I'm gathering a small group to show how humans typically share breakfast together." Kral hesitated, then nodded sharply. "For academic purposes, yes." Within minutes, Max had assembled an unlikely breakfast party. 2 humans, himself and Elena from the Mediterranean station who was on break. Kral the Vargar, Ilara the Lumidian, a curious Melosian in a portable water bubble, and Dr. Vex, who insisted on participating for thorough research. Max served everyone pancakes, waffles, or toast according to their preference and compatibility, then took a seat himself. "The key thing about shared meals is conversation," he explained. "We don't just eat together. We talk, we connect, we strengthen our social bonds." "What is the appropriate discussion topic during morning consumption?" asked Dr. Vex, delicately maneuvering a piece of waffle with 3 of his limbs. "Anything, really," Elena chimed in. "Plans for the day, dreams from the night before, news, weather, or just catching up with family and friends." "I dreamt of hunting," offered Kral unexpectedly. "My pack chased a Nubian gazelle across the red plains of our ancestral homeland." She paused, looking slightly embarrassed. "I do not usually share dreams." "That sounds like a wonderful dream," Max said warmly. "Do you miss your homeworld?" A ripple of surprise passed through the alien participants. Personal questions during consumption were apparently unexpected, but after a moment's hesitation, Kral continued, describing her home planet's twin moons and perpetual twilight. This prompted Ilara to share details about the bioluminescent forests where her species evolved, which led Dr. Vex to reminisce about his first field research expedition as a young academic. As the meal progressed, something remarkable happened. The initially stiff, academic atmosphere softened. The aliens began asking each other questions, sharing personal anecdotes, and even making jokes. By the time they had finished eating, a noticeable change had occurred. They were more relaxed with each other, more familiar. "I believe I understand now," Kral said thoughtfully as she set down her fork. "The shared vulnerability of consumption creates a context for social bonding. Ingenious, if inefficient." "Not everything valuable is efficient," Max replied with a smile. Dr. Vex's many eyes blinked in sequence. "Indeed, Mr. Chen, I believe we have all experienced a profound insight into human culture today." He rose, his long limbs unfolding gracefully. "With your permission, I would like to document this breakfast conversation phenomenon for the Academy's cultural database." As the day continued, the exhibition grew more crowded. Word had spread beyond the academy, and visitors from the surrounding space station and even ships in orbit came to observe and participate. Human food, once considered a curious biological necessity, was becoming the talk of the sector. By evening, when the first day of the exhibition was winding down, Max was exhausted but exhilarated. He sat at his now empty pancake station, nursing a cup of coffee and watching the last few groups of aliens discussing their experiences. Dean Orella approached, all 6 of her arms carrying different Earth food samples she had collected throughout the day. "Mr. Chen, I must commend you. This exhibition has exceeded all expectations." "Thank you, Dean. I'm just glad everyone seems to be enjoying themselves." "It is more than enjoyment," she replied seriously. "We are witnessing meaningful cross-cultural understanding. Several faculty members have already proposed new research initiatives based on today's observations." Max nodded, too tired to fully process the implications of what she was saying. However, Dean Orella continued, there has been an unexpected development. The Viserion and Neplexian delegations, who have maintained cold diplomatic relations for decades, have both approached me with a request. Max frowned. The Viserions and Neplexians were 2 powerfully telepathic species whose long-standing ideological differences had complicated coalition politics for generations. "What kind of request?" he asked cautiously. "They wish to know if human food rituals could be adapted for diplomatic purposes. Specifically, they have requested of a peace meal moderated by human cultural experts." Max nearly choked on his coffee. "They want us to host a diplomatic dinner." Dean Orella's compound eyes gleamed. "Indeed. It seems your species' peculiar habit of combining sustenance with social bonding may have applications beyond cultural curiosity. They believe the structured vulnerability of shared consumption might facilitate honest dialogue." As exhaustion gave way to a sense of both responsibility and opportunity, Max realized that his simple morning coffee had somehow evolved into an unexpected form of interstellar diplomacy. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. "I'll need to consult with the other human students," he said finally, "and we'll need to learn more about both species' cultural taboos." Of course, the dinner would be scheduled for the final day of the exhibition. All 6 of Dean Orella's arms made a gesture of gratitude. "Mr. Chen, you may have inadvertently discovered a new approach to galactic diplomacy through the simple act of sharing a meal." As she walked away, Max shook his head in wonder. Who would have thought that pancakes could bridge interstellar divides? Perhaps humanity's supposedly inefficient food rituals had a cosmic purpose after all. He took another sip of his coffee, already planning the menu for what might be the most important dinner in recent galactic history: culinary diplomacy. The Academy's central communications hub buzzed with activity as Max and the other human students researched everything they could find about Viserion and Neplexian customs. The 2 telepathic species had been locked in what humans might call a Cold War for over 70 years. No direct conflict, but persistent ideological tension that occasionally rippled through coalition politics. "This is a terrible idea," muttered Sunita, scrolling through a dense diplomatic archive. "We're culinary students and cultural ambassadors, not professional negotiators. What if we make things worse?" "We're not negotiating anything," Max reminded her. "We're just providing the setting and the structure. The meal is a vehicle for their conversation, not the main event." Paolo looked up from his research tablet. "These Viserions are completely obsessed with hierarchy. Every aspect of their society is structured around dominance and submission, and the Neplexians are their polar opposite, total communitarians who make decisions through group consciousness." "No wonder they don't get along," Kenji observed. "Their entire social structures are incompatible." Max tapped his stylus against the table thoughtfully. "But that's exactly where human food rituals might help. A shared meal has structure, but also equality. Everyone at the table gets fed." The group had spent the entire evening after the first day of the exhibition developing a crash course in interspecies diplomatic dining. The human students had been divided into research teams, each focusing on different aspects. Vassarian customs and taboos, Neplexian traditions and preferences, historical points of contention between the species, and potential menu items compatible with both species' biochemistry. Helena, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. I think our menu needs to include elements of breaking or sharing. In most Earth cultures, the literal breaking of bread has symbolic significance. The Vassarians might interpret that as a show of weakness, warned Paolo. Or as an act of trust, countered Max. It depends on how we frame it. He made a note on his tablet. What about serving styles? Family-style sharing platters would emphasize community, but individual plates would respect autonomy. We could do both, suggested Kenji. Start with individual courses to respect separate identities, then transition to shared platters as the meal progresses, a physical metaphor for cooperation. As the night wore on, a plan began to take shape. It wasn't just about the food. It was about creating an experience that would subtly guide two hostile species toward common ground, using the universal language of shared sustenance. The second day of the human culinary exhibition drew even larger crowds. News had spread throughout the nearby sectors, and visiting dignitaries from various coalition worlds arrived to observe this unexpected cultural phenomenon. Max barely had time to maintain his breakfast station between interviews with academic researchers and curious officials. The Vassarian and Neplexian delegations kept their distance from each other, touring the exhibition separately and communicating with the human students through intermediaries. Both species were capable of consuming similar foods to humans, though with some modifications for toxicity concerns. By evening, Max was summoned to a private meeting with Dean Orella and representatives from both delegations. The Vassarian diplomat, Subhierarch Tovax, was a tall, angular being with iridescent scales and piercing silver eyes. The Neplexian representative, Unity Speaker male, was shorter and rounder, with soft purple skin that seemed to pulse slightly with each breath, suggesting the synchronized consciousness that connected all Neplexians. Mr. Chen, Dean Orella began formally, I have explained your concept of a peace meal to our distinguished guests. They have questions before agreeing to participate. Subhierarch Tovax fixed Max with an intense stare. Human, your species claims that sharing nutrients facilitates diplomatic exchange. Explain the mechanism. How does biological maintenance affect political discourse? Max took a deep breath. This wasn't just about coffee anymore. It's not about the nutrients themselves, he began carefully. It's about the shared vulnerability and experience. When different beings come together to eat, several things happen simultaneously. First, there's a basic level of trust established. We're all setting aside our defenses to nourish ourselves. Second, the sensory experience of food creates a common reference point, something everyone at the table has shared. Unity Speaker male's skin rippled with subtle patterns. We understand shared experience. All Neplexians are constantly sharing consciousness. How does this temporary sharing during consumption differ? It's precisely because it's temporary and physical, Max explained. It creates a confined space, both in time and location, where normal barriers can be temporarily lowered. Throughout human history, some of our most successful diplomatic breakthroughs happen not during formal negotiations, but during meals shared by opposing parties. Subhierarch Tovax's scales shifted color slightly, indicating interest despite his rigid posture. The Vassarian hierarchy recognizes the strategic value of controlled vulnerability. However, we require assurance that proper protocols will be observed. Our position in relation to the Neplexians must be acknowledged, as must our equal standing, countered male, purple skin darkening slightly. Max nodded to both. The beauty of a diplomatic meal is that it can simultaneously honor hierarchy and equality. In human tradition, there are honored positions at the table that recognize status, while the act of sharing food itself emphasizes our common needs and experiences. The two diplomats exchanged looks, the first direct acknowledgement of each other since entering the room. We will require details of this proposed ritual, Tovax said finally. And assurance that neither side will be disadvantaged, added Mayo. Max smiled. I'll have a complete proposal for you both to review by morning. The final day of the exhibition arrived with tension and anticipation. While the public areas continued to showcase human culinary traditions, a private dining room had been transformed for the diplomatic meal. The human students had worked through the night to create a space that would honor both species' customs while introducing human dining traditions. The room was arranged with careful symbolism. The oval table represented equality, no head position, while elevated chairs for the Vessarians acknowledged their preference for hierarchy. The lighting combined the bright illumination preferred by Neplexians with the directional spotlighting that Vessarians used to indicate status. Small, separate water features along the walls provided both the flowing water sounds that soothed Neplexians and the rhythmic droplets that Vessarians used in their meditation practices. Max surveyed the room one last time, making small adjustments to the place settings. Alina and Kenji were in the adjacent kitchen, putting final touches on the carefully designed menu. Paolo and Sunita were reviewing diplomatic protocols with the student volunteers who would serve the meal. "It looks perfect," said a voice from the doorway. Dean Orella entered, all 6 of her arms clasped in what Max had learned was a gesture of approval. The Coalition Diplomatic Corps has expressed great interest in this experiment. If successful, it may establish a new protocol for difficult negotiations. "No pressure," Max muttered, straightening a fork that was already perfectly aligned. "You humans thrive under pressure," Dean Orella observed. "It's one of your most remarkable adaptations." Before Max could respond, a chime indicated that the delegations had arrived. He took a deep breath and moved to the entrance, where both the Vessarian and Neplexian parties stood rigidly on opposite sides of the corridor. "Distinguished representatives," Max began with a formal bow. "Welcome to our table. Before we enter, I would like to explain a human custom." He held up a small cloth napkin. "In many Earth cultures, we begin formal meals by placing this cloth across our laps. It originated as a practical protection for clothing, but evolved into a signal, a moment marking the transition from outside concerns to the shared experience of the meal." He demonstrated, then offered napkins to each delegate. After a moment's hesitation, both groups followed the ritual, creating the first synchronized action between them in decades. "Excellent," Max smiled. "Now please enter and find your places. The table cards are in both your languages." The seating arrangement had been meticulously planned, alternating Vessarians and Neplexians around the table, with Max and Dean Orella at opposite ends of the oval to serve as moderators. As they settled in, soft music began, a composition specially created by the Academy's acoustics department that blended elements from both species' traditional harmonies. "Before we begin," Max announced once everyone was seated, "I want to explain the purpose of this gathering. This is not a formal negotiation. There is no agenda beyond the shared experience of a meal. In human tradition, the dinner table is both a protected and liminal space, a place where we set aside external concerns to focus on what we share, the need for sustenance, the pleasure of flavors, and the company of others." He nodded to Paolo, who entered with the first course, a clear broth served in shallow bowls with a small intact dumpling floating in the center. "This first course represents both separation and potential," Max explained, as the bowls were placed before each guest. "The clear broth allows you to see what's contained within. Transparency. The dumpling holds its contents within a delicate boundary, just as each of us contains our thoughts and experiences. On Earth, we often begin meals with soup to prepare the palate and open the senses." Sub-hierarch Tovax examined the bowl with cautious interest. "The hierarchy is maintained, the solid above the liquid. Acceptable." Unity speaker Mel's skin rippled with subtle patterns. "The shared medium of broth connects the separate elements. We find this symbolism appropriate." Max demonstrated how to break the dumpling with a spoon, releasing its contents into the broth. After observing, both delegations followed suit, creating a moment of synchronized action that didn't go unnoticed. As they ate, Max gently guided the conversation toward neutral topics: architectural preferences, astronomical phenomena, academic traditions. To his surprise, both species had more common interests than either had acknowledged previously. The second course arrived. Individual plates with 5 distinct preparations of a protein-rich fungus that was compatible with both species' digestion. Each preparation highlighted a different cooking technique: steaming, grilling, fermenting, raw preparation, and molecular gastronomy. In human dining, Max explained, we often celebrate diversity within unity. The same ingredient transformed through different approaches, each with its own merits. The metaphor wasn't subtle, but it didn't need to be. As the delegates tasted each preparation, they began offering their preferences and observations. A Neplexian diplomat noted that the grilled preparation reminded them of a delicacy from their homeworld, which prompted a Vassarian to mention a similar dish from their ancient traditions. By the third course, a shared platter placed in the center of the table from which everyone was invited to serve themselves. The atmosphere had transformed, the rigid postures had relaxed, and conversation flowed more naturally. When a Vassarian diplomat accidentally reached for a serving utensil at the same time as an Neplexian, instead of withdrawing in offense, they exchanged a gesture of acknowledgement. Human Max, Subhierarch Tovax, said during a pause between courses, "Your species has developed an intriguing social technology in these consumption rituals. The structured informality creates a unique transitional space." Unity speaker Mel's skin pulsed in agreement. Indeed, the individual experience within collective context mirrors aspects of consciousness we find valuable. We had not considered that physical beings could achieve such balanced duality through external means. Max smiled, recognizing the profound observation hidden within their formal comments. Food brings people together in ways that formal structures sometimes can't, he said simply. It reminds us of our shared experiences, even when our perspectives differ. As the meal progressed through its carefully planned courses, something remarkable happened. The telepathic barriers that both species maintained, the Vassarians to protect hierarchical thought structures, the Neplexians to preserve communal consciousness, began to soften. Not completely, but enough that genuine exchange became possible. By dessert, a spectacular construction that could be disassembled and shared in multiple ways. The two delegations were actively discussing a scientific exchange program that had been deadlocked in negotiations for years. Perhaps, suggested Subhierarch Tovax, with unprecedented informality, we could continue these discussions during another such meal. Unity speaker Mel's skin glowed with warm colors. The Unity would welcome this approach. Perhaps alternating between our traditional consumption settings would further mutual understanding. As the meal concluded and the diplomats prepared to depart, each approached Max separately to express their appreciation. But the most meaningful moment came when, without prompting, the leaders of both delegations exchanged their table napkins, a spontaneous creation of a new shared ritual. Dean Orella waited until the delegates had departed before approaching Max, who had collapsed into a chair, exhausted but elated. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice carrying unusual warmth, "the Academy Council has been monitoring this experiment with great interest. What began as a simple cultural exhibition has demonstrated unexpected applications in diplomatic relations." Max laughed softly. "All because I wanted my morning coffee." Indeed, small cultural elements often contain profound insights. She paused, all 6 arms arranged in a formal posture. "The Council has proposed establishing a permanent center for human culinary diplomacy within the Academy. We would like you to consider a position as its first director upon your graduation." Max stared at her in shock. "Me? But I'm just the human who recognized that sometimes the most profound connections are made not through formal structures, but through sharing the simple necessities of life," she finished for him. "The Coalition has negotiation protocols, technological exchanges, and formal diplomatic hierarchies. What it has lacked is the understanding of how shared vulnerability, as exemplified in your meal rituals, can create bridges where none seemed possible. As Dean Orella departed, Max remained in the empty dining room, still processing what had happened. 3 days ago, he'd been a regular student missing his morning coffee. Now he was apparently pioneering a new field of interspecies diplomacy. Zilks found him there, the Thorian's crystalline form catching the dim lights of the room. "I understand your consumption ritual was successful," Zilks said, settling into the chair beside Max. Max nodded, still somewhat dazed. "They're creating an entire diplomatic approach based on human meals. Me bringing coffee to class somehow turned into galactic diplomacy." Zilks's form shimmered with what Max recognized as his species' version of laughter. "Perhaps it is not so surprising. My people have a saying. The crystal that seems most impractical often contains the most perfect structure." Meaning? What other species dismissed as human inefficiency, your elaborate consumption rituals, your emotional connection to sustenance, may in fact be a sophisticated social technology we fail to recognize. Zilks's crystalline body refracted light in complex patterns. "You found joy in necessity, and in doing so, created something that transcends mere biological maintenance." Max smiled, thinking of the simple pleasure of his morning coffee routine. "I guess sometimes the most human things about us are the most valuable after all." "Indeed. And now," Zilks added with uncharacteristic playfulness, "perhaps you can explain to me this human concept of dessert first." Several students were discussing it with great enthusiasm. Max laughed and stood up. "That, my friend, is an entirely different diplomatic negotiation, one between what we want and what we should do. And humans have been mediating that particular conflict for thousands of years." As they walked back toward the dormitories, Max realized that in a galaxy obsessed with efficiency and advancement, humanity's supposedly primitive attachment to food had turned out to be surprisingly sophisticated. Their rituals around eating, born from necessity but evolved into art, had created a unique form of connection that even telepathic species couldn't achieve on their own. All because he hadn't wanted to give up his morning coffee. Sometimes, Max reflected, the most profound revolutions began with the simplest acts of being human, and in a universe full of diverse species racing toward ever greater technological achievements, perhaps there was something valuable in remembering the power of breaking bread together, of finding meaning and connection in the simple necessities of life. Dean Orella's words echoed in his mind. Human culinary diplomacy. He liked the sound of that. Maybe tomorrow he'd introduce the academy to the concept of Sunday brunch.